Well, I've been looking forward to this chat with a real-life astronaut. Terry Virts has spent more than 200 days in space, taking part in 3 spacewalks, piloting the NASA Space Shuttle, and working as commander of the International Space Station and taking more photographs from space than any other human being. Terry, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here.
Your journey started as a student, studying science and mathematics, and then earning a Master of Aeronautics. Is this what you always dreamed about?
It was, actually. When I was a kid, the very first book I ever read was about Apollo in kindergarten. I grew up with pictures of airplanes and space stuff on my walls, and it was just something I was always interested in.
It's not something everyone gets to do, though.
I didn't think I'd get to do it either. It's crazy to think you're going to be an astronaut, but I always did the things that I needed. I checked the boxes that you needed to check, and then when it came time as a test pilot, I went ahead and applied and got lucky and got picked.
So what was the path? Let's go way forward when you were looking around or hearing about space travel and all that sort of thing. Beyond your sort of secondary school years, what did you do?
So there's different paths to be an astronaut. Mine was through the pilot route. So I went to the Air Force Academy, which is a university, and got a math degree and a French degree. I became an F-16 fighter pilot, and then I became a test pilot. And from there, I applied to NASA. So it's a pretty traditional, astronaut pilot career that I did.
And when did you find out that you'd been accepted to perhaps head way up into the sky?
Yeah, so I found out. I was in a meeting with a group of engineers at Edwards Air Force Base, and the chief astronaut called me and said, "Hey, are you still interested in coming down? You can't tell anybody because Congress hasn't approved the list yet, but you got picked." And I'm ready to jump off the roof. I'm so excited. And I was surrounded by engineers, but I couldn't tell anybody. But they could see it in my face. So I was like, "All right, guys, let's get back to our meeting." And then 30 seconds later on the speaker, "Party after work for Terry Virts. He just got picked to be an astronaut." Because I didn't say anything, but they could see it in my face.
How many people are on that list?
My class had 17. Which is fairly large. It was a space shuttle class. The most recent class had, I think, 8. Their nickname is the 8 balls, so there's 4 men and 4 women. So that's kind of a rough size of our classes.
But what is it they're looking for? What is it that they've seen in you that is different to all these? I presume all those other people were equally qualified?
There's so many, overqualified people, obviously. So there's an element of luck, but what we're looking for is people who are like technically competent, who do well on their job, and most importantly have some type of operational background, because we don't need, book smart people in space. You need people who can handle an emergency or pilot a spacecraft or do a spacewalk. The book smart people are going to design the spaceship or design the experiments on Earth, but it's the astronaut's job to do this stuff, right? So it's a lot more operational than it is theoretical.
So the actual training to be an astronaut, how long does that take, and what sort of things?
So they have what we call the ASCAN year, the astronaut candidate year, and that's about a year and a half of learning about the space station systems, learning the basics of spacewalk. You start learning Russian. They do media training, some basic medical. Basically, all the stuff you need as astronauts, they give you the basic stuff. And then you sit around and wait. In my case, I waited almost a decade. It was a long wait. Everybody waited 8 to 12 years. And then when I got assigned to my recent space station flight, it was about a 2.5-year training period.
So you waited 10 years, then another 2.5?
No. So for my shuttle flight, so I got assigned maybe 8.5 years after I got picked to be an astronaut. Had to wait a year, and then I flew on the shuttle. So it was almost a decade before I flew.
Were you talking to people who had already been?
Oh, yeah. Well, the office is full of, flown astronauts. So it's great because, you share a desk with a guy who's been in space 3 or 4 times. So there's lots of sharing, try this, watch out for this. You learn a lot of the things. But still, when you finally make it to space, you just can't be briefed on it. You have to experience it yourself.
Is it a humbling experience?
Yes. You see yourself in the universe, and you kind of realize that a lot of the things that we think are important are probably not that important in the scheme of the universe. And so it's the ultimate humbling experience.
I think I'll get a no to this, but were you scared?
As a test pilot and fighter pilot, really the fear that I had was that I'd screw something up and get a nickname for my buddies, because they'd be watching me and they're like, "Oh, Virts did this." So my biggest fear was it probably shows how insane I am because it should have been the rocket blowing up, but I was more worried about messing something up and getting a nickname.
You've also taken more photographs in space than anyone. Was the love of photography already there, or did you just want to capture as many moments as possible?
Yeah, it was already there. As a kid, I bought myself a 35 millimeter SLR back when they used to have film, and I learned about exposure and aperture and all that kind of stuff. So I've always been a photographer, and my mission got extended by a month when there was a Russian rocket accident, and that we ended up staying in space a lot longer. So that was part of the reason I took so many pictures. The other part was I helped to film an IMAX movie, which is actually playing in Melbourne right now. It's called A Beautiful Planet, and it's the best way to experience space without going there. And I took a lot of pictures for that movie.
Thank you to Gary, who's emailed. I would need to ask a favour of your astronaut friend. We're friends. Did you know that, Terry?
We're mates.
We are now. When you're up there and you look up at the sky, what do you see? Is his question.
So you see similar things, except for there's no clouds and there's no light pollution. So you see a lot more of it. So I know the constellations in the northern hemisphere, but I could never see them in space. I could usually pick out the bright planets like Jupiter or Venus, but I could never pick out constellations because there's so many stars.
What protects the spacecraft? Because I would imagine there's a lot of stuff flipping around in the air.
That's a big problem.
Or lack of air.
We have debris shields that's just a thin aluminum shield, maybe 10 or 15 centimeters above the main spaceship. And the theory is if a small piece of dust or paint speck or whatever hits that debris shield, it will cause it to kind of spray and spread out before it hits the main pressure module. And when I did a spacewalk, you can see lots of little pits where things have actually hit the station on the outside.
Can you stay around for a few minutes?
I can.
Great. If anyone, and you're happy to take calls?
Yeah, that'd be good.
If anyone has a question for Terry Virts, give us a call, 96900 693 or 13 13 32. Back shortly. Bit of water boys there. Terry, good afternoon. You're speaking with Terry Virts.
Hello.
Hi, Terry Virts and Dennis. Terry, this is a bit of a trick question. No, not a trick question. The first photograph of the world taken from outer space, are you aware of that?
So I would assume I'm getting quizzed here. Wow. I would assume it's Yuri Gagarin.
No, it was John Glenn.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's probably, I had the good fortune of meeting up with John Glenn.
Uh-huh.
We had quite a lengthy discussion. He told me about the first photograph taken.
That's interesting.
It was taken with a Minolta SLR camera that he purchased from Kmart.
Oh, wow. And he just brought it with him.
He did talk to his superiors about taking a photograph, and they said, well, this was from John himself. They said, no, we don't want you distracted doing such things.
Thank you, Terry.
That is very interesting.
Thank you for your call. What can you take with you?
So you're allowed to bring personal items, like your family, pictures, or maybe some jewelry to give when you get back, or a watch to give to your kids or your dad or something like that. It's pretty limited on the Soyuz. The Soyuz is a small capsule, and there's 3 of you. You're crammed in there. So they had 1.5 kilograms of items that I could bring.
Do you get lonely?
I never did. You have a crew, so there's people around, not a lot. And you can go be by yourself because the space station's so big. But there's a phone. It's the world's best phone because you can call anywhere in the world you want, and nobody can call you, and it's free.
Oh, so you can have contact.
You can have contact with the ground. You have to have the right satellite alignment. It's not always available, but when it's available, you can ring someone up, and then it just cuts off randomly when the satellite gets out of view. So it's not perfect, but
at least there's contact.
Oh, I think of my grandparents when they ran off to World War II. They were gone for years, and all they had was an occasional letter that would take a month to get home.
What happens if you're having an argument with one of your fellow travelers?
Well, the beauty of the space station is that you can go by yourself. It's not a capsule where you're, right next to each other. So, and that's one of my goals as commander was to be friends after our mission and our expedition, when I was commander of Expedition 43, and we're all friends. It was great, but the large space and personal space really helps.
Ron, good afternoon. You're speaking with Terry Virts.
Good afternoon. Listen, years back I heard of an idea that sounded fantastic for getting rid of space debris, which was very, very high altitude balloons doing like an air shot cannon of a lump of non-orbital speed air in front of the debris. And because it's non-orbital speed, it fell straight back down, but the air was in the way of the micro debris, which caused it to slow and decay orbit and drop out of orbit. Now,
Terry,
what happened to that idea?
Terry, I'll let you answer that.
That's an interesting idea. I have never heard of it. I know that orbital debris is a big problem because personally I had to maneuver to avoid some of the debris that our Chinese friends had caused when they shot a military anti-satellite weapon and exploded a satellite. So I had to maneuver to avoid it. And I know getting rid of debris is a big problem. And I haven't heard of that particular idea, but it sounds interesting. And if it works, that would be a great startup company to start.
Nick, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. I just have a quick question. When you do your training, Terry, and you're in that machine that spins you in every single direction,
Right.
How long does it last for, and what on earth are you thinking whilst that's happening?
So when I launched with the Russians in Baikonur in Kazakhstan, they have that device, and you can sit in there and you can spin around, and you don't have to do it. They actually let you volunteer to do it or not. But I did it. I don't remember exactly how long, maybe a minute or something like that. And I remember thinking, wow, this sucks. I'm pretty dizzy. And when you go into space, I felt dizzy also, but it was a different kind of thing. I'm not sure that you can actually prepare for it because it's such an alien thing to be floating, but I did get to try that out.
Good questions. Joe, good afternoon.
Hi, Dennis. Hey, Terry. Listen, there's a lot of talk about us going to Mars someday, and they're saying that it could be possibly a one-way trip. Just wondering if Terry would ever consider doing something like that.
So our President Kennedy in the 60s gave his famous speech where he said, "We commit this nation to achieving the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth." So that was my favorite part of Kennedy's speech, was the returning him safely
Yes,
to the
please.
Earth. So I would probably be more interested in a round-trip ticket than a one-way.
Take us through a spacewalk. What's it like?
So spacewalking is amazing. Of all the fighter jets and space shuttle launches and rendezvous, I've never done anything like spacewalking. You're in a spacesuit that weighs probably 200 kilos on Earth. In space, it's weightless, but it has different rubber layers. And on the other side, what's amazing is the visor is just a thin plastic thing. So these layers and the thin plastic. On the other side of that is death, right? So you want to take care of your spaceship, or space suit, which is essentially a spaceship. You don't want to rip it or tear it. And 99% of a spacewalk is work. It's work, 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 work.
So if you're doing a spacewalk, isn't there a chance that some debris might hit you?
There absolutely is, and that's one of the big risks. It's one of the reasons why your spacewalks are work, 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 because once you're outside, it's dangerous, and you just want to get through it and get back inside.
How long are you out for?
My first two were about 6.5 plus hours, and the last one was about 5.5 to 6 hours.
Yeah, but the fact that you're out there for that long increases that chance.
It really does. And, knock on wood, we've been lucky so far, but when I was walking, you could see little craters and pits in the station where debris had hit it.
Kiara, good afternoon to you.
Hello,
Hello, Kiara.
Hello, Kiara.
How old are you?
I'm 9.
Okay, what's your question for Terry?
How many years did it take him to study to go on a space station?
That's a great question, Kira. What's interesting? Really, my whole life I've been studying, and I'm still studying. It's kind of a lifelong thing, but you need to get a university degree, and then you probably need like an advanced degree, like a doctorate or a PhD, or you need to become a test pilot. And then once you get to NASA, there's several years of training that you have to do. So all in all, at least for NASA astronauts, they probably don't become astronauts ready to fly in space until they're in their 30s, and they might not fly until they're in their 40s. So it takes a little bit of time. That's a great question.
It's a good question. Thank you for listening, Kiara. Brent?
Commander, how do you do?
How do you do? Doing well.
I'm a 737 captain. I just want to know what's NASA's official line on you guys reporting any ETVs, extraterrestrial vehicles that you may see?
That's an interesting question. They never briefed us on that policy. But that's a good question. You'd probably want to make sure that what you were seeing is actually a UFO. You wouldn't want to say, "Hey, Houston, we saw something weird out there," and have it be, a part of the station that just floated away. But I never saw any, so I never had a chance to report it.
When you've been sitting around the canteen table with your fellow study mates and and workers and people who have been up there as well as yourself, are there any stories of seeing UFOs?
I've never heard one. It's funny. The typical media is that the UFOs go to Roswell, New Mexico, and that's like the world famous Area 51 or whatever. And I remember thinking, if I had come from some thousands of light years all the way to Earth, I'd probably go to Australia or maybe the Bahamas or something more than I would Roswell, New Mexico.
Is it true that when you came to Australia, you wanted a hat? I want to make Australia great again.
Oh, I'm waiting. I'm waiting to grab one later on this afternoon.
I haven't seen one, but they might be doing one especially for you. If you had seen UFOs, a serious question, are you allowed to talk about it?
You really can talk about anything you want. I mean, I never got briefed, don't talk about this or whatever. It's kind of expected that you're not going to talk about politics and you're not going to say I'm Trump or Hillary Clinton supporter. But no one ever briefed us on that. I think the odds of that happening are pretty, of all the things that NASA has to worry about, that's probably not something they have to worry about.
The first landing on the moon, was it a conspiracy?
It's funny that people ask that. I'm actually good friends with Buzz Aldrin, and I know several of the Apollo guys. So having worked at the government for decades, I really think that we're just barely good enough to get to the moon. Like, that's a hard thing, and I think we could probably just barely do it. But I'm 100% sure that there's no way we could cover it up. We're not nearly good enough to cover up something like that.
You're here in Melbourne for the School of Life. That's tonight. And also the Commonwealth Bank's Wired for Wonder conference tomorrow. Tickets are still available. theschooloflife.com/Melbourne, theschooloflife.com/Melbourne, and wiredforwonder.com as well. You've recently retired. I imagine it's pretty hard to let go. I would imagine you're probably going through a bit of what a high-level sportsman would be going through.
I was worried about that. I thought that might happen. But I had gotten to a point where I had done everything there is to do at NASA, and I was ready to go out and do a new challenge. I enjoy sharing my stories with people, and people around the world are interested in them. And so I wanted to try and write a book. I've just finished writing the book, and now we're going through the process of getting it printed.
Does that include your photography?
It's a space photography book.
Yep.
It should be coming out in October. Hopefully I'll be back here to help promote it and share it with folks. So I enjoy what I'm doing now a lot, and having spent all this time in the government, it's kind of refreshing to not be there and try a new career.
But you'll keep in contact with those people. It's a bit of a club, I imagine.
Yeah, I have so many great friends in the astronaut office, and I occasionally get a call of, "Hey, where'd you leave this?" or "How'd you get this hose connected?" If Mission Control called me a few weeks ago to ask me how I got this one particular hose connected, so I still stay in touch.
Great to meet you. Fascinating. And again, wiredforwonder.com or theschooloflife.com/Melbourne. Terry, thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It is 1:30. Time for a news update. Ashley Brown.
Good afternoon, Dennis.